All right, everybody, we'll try to make this quick because I'm in the garage and it is hot as dick out right now and high humidity. So I've got the fan on in the background, so hopefully that's not going to drown out the noise too much. But I did my final handlebar mod. I have gone back and forth trying to find the damn comfortable yet sporty handlebar for the Z900 RS. I'm back on the bar I started with, the MA006 by Rizoma. I have the stock bar. By comparison, so you can see how much, look at the little bit of rise there is in that, and then look at that. It's massive. This is off like a beach bike, like a Huffy or something, or a Schwinn. You'd ride around and pedal at the beach. I have another Rizoma bar, the MA009, which is supposed to be a tiny bit taller. It's not. It just changes the angle of the wrists, and that was hurting my neck. So I've gone back and forth. I decided to just give this one a try again, because one thing I noticed was the bike felt quite a bit different when I installed that shock, the K-Tech Razor R Lite. When I did, I was never able to get the right rider sag before. I was probably at 48 to 50 millimeters in the back. I'm just too heavy for that stock shock. So I put in the Razor down there with the red springs, and I was able to dial in the 30 millimeters of sag. So at that point, I was able to raise the back end up a good bit. When I sit on it now, it feels like it's 3/4 of an inch or an inch taller in the back. So in doing that, it pitches me more forward. And so this is why you say, well, wait, isn't that going to put more pressure on your wrists? My problem was never in my wrists. I can ride this damn thing all day long, and I feel a little bit in my wrist, but this one never hurts my neck. When you think about how low the handlebars are down there, now right now it looks off because it's in a wheel chock in the front, which is raising the front up. But the handlebars, when this thing's on level ground straight up and down, the ends of the bars are at or below the seat level. I mean, that's a fairly aggressive stance, and yet it doesn't bother my neck. Yesterday I was out riding, and even last weekend when I was up in, up at Deals Gap, I was able to go all day by moving around a lot, but this was also still tweaking my neck. Now, it did feel better once I went to that shock, and that's what got me thinking. I don't know why. Being fully forward, it's like I'm using the muscles in the front of my chest and my pecs and things like that, the inside of my arm, biceps. Those seem to be the muscles at play. When the bars are up high, I can only explain it like this. Just take your arm, even without a weight, and just hold your elbow up and your arm up and just sit there for 3 minutes or 5 minutes and wait till you start getting that burning kind of pain like in your neck where it runs down into your shoulder. That's what it felt like. So I'm like, all right, maybe having my hands up high, I'm tense, something's happening, but so I just went ahead and put the orange bar, the gold bar back on, and it feels fine. It handles so much better because I'm in a much more aggressive position. It's easier to hang off the bike. My weight's more over the front end. You get a little more feedback. You're not so upright trying to ride it like a sport bike. Now it's like that. It's more like the Street Triple, which is a sport bike without a fairing. This has a very similar seating position, and that bar is just as low, if not a little bit lower and more forward than that, without being radical like clip-ons. So, and another thing this time around, got my camera hook up again. Instead of like pulling off the headlight and taking these and disconnecting them and running them back and through and out a different way to where they were like down here, they were kind of coming up here and looked kind of wonky. All I did was turn this upside down. I got that idea by looking at this. That's how the stock one comes off the top. So I'm like, okay, I can do a similar thing. So all I did was, I just kind of taped them together here just to kind of keep them all one. So, because they were trying to go at like slightly different angles and separating. So I just put these things on it, just taped it, keep everything nice together. There's no binding at all in any direction at full lock. And so all I had to do was just take a center punch and just take a 3/8 inch drill bit and just put a little dimple in there for this to go into and lock in for that locking pin. So I just angled it up. I can turn it all the way around. And this also, that was the other problem with the low bar, was this was almost touching the tank. And so now I've got clearance in there. I've got 1/2 inch between, and the lowest thing is actually the brake reservoir. So I'm really happy with it. I think it looks good. I think the gold ties in good with this, especially with the gold fleck in the paint, which you don't see here, but you'll see it in the sunlight. But just doing that, I didn't have to remove the whole headlight assembly, and all the cables fit. they would normally be in behind here. I just pulled them out. I didn't have to remove anything or even use any tools. I just kind of pulled on it with my finger to pull that piece out just a little bit, and then with the other hand, pulled them out and just ran them that way. Same on the other side. So everything lines up perfect. The only thing, I had to get different bar end mirrors that go in the end and have the rubber grommet that when you tighten it, expands and grips it. So I picked those up from Cycle Gear. I was able to do the same with my other mirror. I mean, it works good. It works well. I think it looks good. Didn't change the camera mount at all. It's, since the back end is now up more from having the shock sprung properly, it's weird, but it's more comfortable than the stock tall bar. I don't know why, but if you have that problem, a lot of people think, oh, then I'm having a neck problem. You know, I need the bars to be up on higher and closer to you. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I can ride that all day. I can ride that all day. It never bothered me. And I'm like, why does the high back, wide swept beach cruiser bar hurt my neck? So on a whim, I'm like, now that the suspension's dialed up and I've got the bike sitting the way it should instead of squatting, let me go back to the sportiest bar, and it works. Feels great, handles much better. Not that the bike, it doesn't so much change the way the bike handles, it's how you interface with the bike. It changes the ergonomics, gets you over the front. The bars are a little narrower. They're a little bit more like sport. They're not as angled down as those, but they're definitely on par with a bike like a Street Triple, Speed Triples, Ducati Street Fighters, Tuonos, things like that. None of those sport bikes have that. Granted, you could say this is not a sport bike in that class, but with the thicker fork oil, with the shock, with the better tires, with it actually the suspension dialed in and set up properly, the ECU flash, things like that, this is a sport bike. It isn't as fast as other bikes, but it will surprise you. And I find with long arms, having my weight pitched forward, having my hands a little closer together, but also further forward instead of back here, it just makes it really easy to hang off the bike and dive into a turn and keep that weight on the front tire, keep that tire pushed into the pavement and feel what's going on. Those big high sweat bars, you could do it, but you had to ride around the bars. So anyway, there it is. Went for a little ride today, put about 70 miles on it. No crick in my neck, felt great, handled well. And then I came home and took this out for a spin because I love this bike. If I could only have one bike, like if they just said, you know what, you got one bike you're allowed to have, out of all of these, it'd be between those two. This is better on track, and if you really want to push it up in the mountains, but it's like that last 2%, you can go just as fast, most people, on a bike like that. So it come down to those two because they've got the comfort, they've got the coolness, they've got the attitude, they've got the mid-range grunt, and you can go just as stupid fast on the street. All you're giving up really is that, 15.5 red line and the wind protection on the track. And if that's important to you, then you probably want a bike more like that. But if I could only have one of what I own, it would be one of those two. And I don't know which one, honestly. They're both, in some ways this is cooler. This gets a lot more attention, and it's got a fatter torque curve in the mid-range and stuff, but that's the quicker bike. And that handling is good, if not better than that. So that'd be a tough choice. If you can only have one bike, probably be another Tuono. I go with the new body style Tuono, but I won't get one until they get a damn dealer in Atlanta. But anyway, if you're thinking about the bars, you can see the stance from different angles. That's a good setup. It's very, very similar to that. And if you go right from that, you want to pause it and then go to that. Very similar, very similar. Looks good, and it really improves the handling and the ergonomics if you're a sporty rider. If you're a shorter rider, now that might, and this is maybe why that lower bar works for me, is because I'm 6'4". I've got really long arms. So for me, having my arms kind of up high, it's like the bars don't support the weight of my arms, which sounds weird to say. So I'm like holding my arms up because they're up so high and back. And when you do that after a while, that's where I get that crick in my neck and my shoulder. So for me, I'm not really leaning forward that much. I'm leaning forward a little bit, which helps the handling, but it's not that much of a reach. If you're a really short rider, that might have you stretched out and more like this, and you might not like it. But if you're a taller rider, These bars moving, you think the comfort means, you know, moving it towards you? Try the opposite and see if that doesn't work for you. Anyway, I'm sweating my ass off here in the garage. I'm going in the house. Everybody have a good weekend.